On their wedding night, the millionaire touched her hand and whispered something unexpected. She, young and innocent, never imagined those words would reveal the true meaning of love. Where are you watching this story from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because what happened next will move you. The Atlantic roared in the distance when Emily first observed the Sullivan mansion. The century-old stones, silent witnesses to previous generations, seemed to whisper secrets she wasn't yet ready to understand. There was something intimidating about those high walls and large windows that reflected Boston's golden sunset, something that tightened her chest with a mixture of fear and fascination. Sometimes the highest walls hide the most fragile hearts, her mother had told her that morning, while adjusting the ivory dress Emily now wore as she climbed the steps to what would be her new life. When Michael extended his hand at the threshold, she felt the contrast of those strong yet strangely delicate fingers against her skin. It wasn't the touch she expected from a man whose shipbuilding empire dominated the entire New England coast. His eyes, the exact color of the calm sea, studied her with an intensity that made her hold her breath. "Welcome home," he said, and his deep voice resonated in the marble foyer like a promise neither of them knew if they could keep. 22 years against 40. A respected but ruined family since her father's illness, facing Boston's most powerful surname. An arranged marriage in the 21st century, when old Boston Brahmin traditions intertwined with modernity like waves among rocks. Emily felt the weight of the gold band on her ring finger while observing the family portrait that presided over the main staircase. Generations of Sullivans watched her from gold frames, and she wondered if her image would someday hang there too, or if she would be just a footnote in the history of that dynasty. That night, as the sea breeze stirred the curtains in the master bedroom, Michael sat on the edge of the canopied bed and took her hand with a gentleness that contradicted rumors about his inflexible character in business. "I will be gentle with you," he whispered. And although his words could have been a promise of physical consideration, Emily sensed he was speaking of something much deeper, the care of her heart, her dreams, her soul yet to be discovered. The jasmine candles dimly illuminated Michael's face, revealing small wrinkles at the corners of his eyes she hadn't noticed during the ceremony. They weren't marks of age, but traces of a life she still knew nothing about. And in that precise moment, as the scent of magnolias rose from the garden through the open windows, Emily understood the truth that would mark her destiny. Sometimes, the deepest unions begin in the unexplored territory of shared silence. The first week in the Sullivan mansion passed like a hazy dream for Emily. Each morning she awoke startled, needing a few seconds to remember where she was, to assimilate that the high ceilings with moldings and Egyptian cotton sheets were part of her new reality. Michael was already gone when she opened her eyes. He left at dawn for the shipyards, leaving behind only the sandalwood scent of his aftershave. Breakfast always awaited her on the private terrace overlooking the inner garden, not in the formal dining room she had known during their brief engagement. Strong coffee, freshly baked pastries, seasonal fruits, small details that revealed silent attention, an attempt to make her feel at home. "The master specifically asked about your preferences," Mrs. Williams confessed, the 60-year-old housekeeper whose presence in the house predated even Michael himself. "He's never before shown interest in such details with anyone." Emily walked the second-floor corridors, running her fingertips over imported silk wallpaper, trying to memorize the maze of closed rooms. 18 in total. Some hadn't been opened in years, Mrs. Williams had told her. "This house is full of secrets, ma'am, but not all of them are dark." On the third day she found the library. A circular room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, mobile noble wood ladders, and large windows framing Boston Harbor as if it were a living canvas. There, amid the scent of old paper and leather bindings, Emily discovered the first crack in her marriage's apparent perfection, a photograph forgotten between the pages of a treatise on naval architecture. Michael, 20 years younger, smiling as she had never seen him smile, with a slender, dark-haired woman whose face was marked with a cross drawn in red ink. On the back, in angular handwriting, she recognized as her husband's. "Remember why walls exist. Some men build ships to conquer the sea, others to escape the land," said a voice behind her, startling her. David Parker, Michael's personal assistant for 15 years, watched her from the doorway with an indecipherable expression. "Do you know what kind of builder my husband is?" Emily asked. discreetly sliding the photograph back between the book's pages. David smiled melancholically before answering, "The kind who builds perfect ships because he fears any imperfection will make him shipwreck." That afternoon during dinner, Emily observed Michael meticulously cutting his meat into exactly equal pieces, always placing his napkin at the same angle on his lap, maintaining a polite but superficial conversation about the weather and upcoming social events. "Why did you marry me, Michael?" she suddenly asked, breaking the established script. The silver fork remained suspended halfway between his plate and lips. His usually controlled eyes revealed a flash of genuine surprise. "Because you were different," he finally answered. "Because when our parents arranged that ridiculous lunch, everyone acted as expected, except you. You told that story about how you got lost on Beacon Hill as a child and laughed at yourself without pretension. You were real in a world of appearances." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "Then why do you keep the walls up?" Michael set down his cutlery with mathematical precision and looked at her directly, with a vulnerability that contrasted with his usual composure. "Because protective habits don't disappear just because the heart desires something different." That night, under the silvery light filtering through the curtains, when he thought she was asleep, Emily felt for the first time his fingers gently caressing her hair, like someone touching something infinitely valuable and terrifyingly fragile. Emily's official introduction as Mrs. Sullivan was scheduled for the end of the month, at the annual charity ball at the Boston Yacht Club, an event where Boston's aristocracy and the new business elite converged in a ritual as old as the Atlantic itself, the display of power and influence. "The dress we ordered from New York arrived this morning," Michael announced during breakfast. "I hope it meets with your approval." Emily looked up from her coffee. "You ordered a dress without consulting me?" A slight blush, almost imperceptible, tinged Michael's usually pale cheeks. "It's tradition that a Sullivan wife debuts in society with an exclusive creation. My mother wore Oscar de la Renta, my grandmother Chanel, and I'll wear Vera Wang, the most promising designer of the new generation." The box waited on the bed when Emily went upstairs. Upon opening the silk lid, an involuntary sigh escaped her lips. The dress was a masterpiece in aquamarine, the exact color of the sea in the bay during clear summer days. The fabric seemed liquid, as if they had captured the essence of water in silk and organza. "It's the color of your eyes," Michael said from the doorway, watching her with an intensity that made her shiver. "I noticed on the first day." Jessica Sullivan, Michael's younger sister, appeared that afternoon unannounced, with the excuse of helping Emily with preparations for the ball. At 35, she remained single by choice, managing the family foundation with an efficiency that intimidated most executives in the business group. "So you're my brother's new acquisition," she said, as she examined Emily with critical eyes that resembled Michael's too much. "Younger than I expected. And you're exactly as I imagined," Emily responded with a polite but firm smile. "The resemblance to your brother is remarkable, especially in the direct way of evaluating people." A spark of surprise, followed by a genuine smile, transformed Jessica's face. "Michael said you had character beneath that delicate appearance." It seems for once he didn't exaggerate. While having tea in the Blue Salon, Jessica began providing information no one else had bothered to share. The names of influential families, who was rising and who declining, the hidden alliances and rivalries. "Victoria Harrington will be there," she said casually, observing Emily's reaction over the rim of her porcelain cup. "I suppose Michael never told you about her." The name floated in the air like a storm cloud, charged with meaning Emily sensed but couldn't fully decipher. "Should I know her?" Jessica let out a brief, joyless laugh. "They were engaged for 3 years. The wedding was scheduled, invitations sent, everything prepared, until she ran away with Thomas Bennett, Michael's best friend, a week before the ceremony." She made a significant pause. "It was 18 years ago, but some wounds never fully heal, understand?" That night, when Michael returned late from the shipyard, Emily was waiting in the office where he usually retreated after dinner. The walls were covered with naval blueprints, scale models of vessels, and photographs of historic launches. A sanctuary dedicated to the art of building something capable of defying the sea and surviving. "You never told me you were engaged before," Emily said without preamble when he entered. Michael stood motionless, hand still on the doorknob. The transformation was subtle but complete, his posture tensed, His eyes became distant, as if activating some long-rehearsed defense mechanism. "Jessica talks too much," he finally responded, heading to the bar and pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey that he drank in one gulp. "Don't you think I deserve to know something like that about the man I married? What difference would knowing my past failures make?" Emily approached slowly, stopping 1 step away. "The difference between a marriage built on convenient lies and one built on uncomfortable but real truths." Their gazes met in a silent duel. Finally, Michael exhaled deeply. "I was 22, the age you are now. I believed love was enough, that promises meant something." He poured another whiskey, but this time just contemplated it. "I learned that trust is a privilege easily revoked." "And is that why you married a stranger? Because it's safer not to involve feelings?" The question floated between them like a challenge. Michael set down his glass and, in an unexpected gesture, took Emily's face between his hands with a gentleness that contrasted with the tension in his jaw. "I married you because when I saw you, I felt something I believed dead for a long time, and it terrified me so much that I had to hide it under the excuse of a convenient family arrangement." His fingers trembled slightly against Emily's cheeks. "But every morning when I wake before dawn and see you sleeping beside me, I wonder if I deserve this second chance." On the night of the ball, Boston sparkled under an exceptionally starry sky. The yacht club, with its modern lines and privileged location facing the harbor, had been transformed into a scene worthy of Boston's golden age, when high society frequented the elite clubs and grand balls at the Plaza Hotel. Emily contemplated her reflection in the full-length mirror. The Vera Wang dress was even more impressive when worn. It fit her figure perfectly, falling in subtle cascades of silk that seemed to move with a life of their own. Her brown hair had been gathered in a low chignon, adorned with antique silver hairpins that had belonged to Michael's grandmother, as Mrs. Williams had explained when handing her the blue velvet box. "You look stunning." Michael's voice startled her. She hadn't heard him enter. He wore an impeccable tuxedo that accentuated his athletic figure, the result of years of sailing. In his hand, he held a dark red leather jewelry case. "A gift," he said, approaching. "It has remained in the family safe for generations, waiting for the right wife." Opening it, Emily caught her breath. A necklace of emeralds and diamonds captured the light, fragmenting it into reflections that seemed to contain the entire spectrum of the ocean. "It's too valuable," she whispered. Michael shook his head. "It's exactly as valuable as it should be." His fingers brushed Emily's nape as he fastened the necklace, sending a shiver down her spine. For the first time since their wedding night, the contact between them extended beyond the formal. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection, and something primitive and electric vibrated in the air between them. The moment broke with the sound of Michael's phone. A brief call, sharp words, and a subtle change in his expression. "Victoria and her husband will be attending tonight," he informed her in a neutral voice, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "I want you to know she means nothing to me now." Emily nodded, though she couldn't help wondering, why does someone need to clarify something means nothing if it truly doesn't? Their entrance to the club was exactly as Jessica had prepared her, a choreographed moment for maximum social exposure. All conversations seemed to pause for an instant when they passed through the double doors. Emily felt dozens of gazes evaluating her, comparing her, judging her. "Breathe," Michael murmured, discreetly placing his hand on the small of her back. "Remember who you are." "The issue is they don't know," Emily responded quietly, maintaining the perfect smile she had practiced for days. The evening progressed amid glasses of champagne, measured conversations, and chamber orchestra music. Emily played the role of the perfect wife, remembering names, asking appropriate questions, laughing at the right moments. Until she saw her. Victoria Harrington needed no introduction. She stood out naturally like a beacon in darkness. Tall, elegant, with the confidence that comes from truly belonging to a world that to Emily felt borrowed. Her husband, Thomas Bennett, drank cognac with a group of businessmen, occasionally glancing at Michael, who deliberately avoided that part of the room. "So you're the new Mrs. Sullivan?" Victoria's voice sounded like expensive silk-brushing crystal. She appeared beside Emily when she found herself momentarily alone at the bar. "So young, so fresh." Emily held her gaze without blinking. "And you must be Mrs. Bennett. I've heard much about your choice of paths in life." A flash of surprise crossed Victoria's perfectly made-up eyes. "I see Michael has told you his version of the story." "Actually, no. Michael barely speaks of the past." Emily took a sip of her champagne. "He prefers to build the future." Victoria leaned in slightly, her expensive perfume invading Emily's personal space. "Have you asked yourself why he chose someone so different from me, so inexperienced, so alien to our world?" The question was designed to hurt, to plant the seed of doubt. Emily felt the venom of the words slide under her skin, seeking a crack to infiltrate. But before she could respond, Jessica's voice interrupted the moment. "Victoria, what a pleasant surprise finding you harassing my sister-in-law." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes shot glacial flashes. "Shouldn't you be attending to your husband? He seems quite interested in that New York model at table 4. Victoria withdrew with a tense smile, not without whispering to Emily, "The Sullivans always protect what's theirs. But ask yourself if it's you they're protecting, or the image you've come to represent." Later, during the dance, as they glided across the floor to a waltz, Emily rested her head on Michael's shoulder. "She still affects you," she murmured, not as an accusation but as a truth that needed acknowledgement. Michael adjusted his hold, drawing her closer. "Not in the way you think," he responded against her hair. "It affects me to remember who I was then. Naive, trusting, willing to give myself completely." He paused as they executed a perfect turn. "I'm ashamed of that young man I was." "I would have loved him," said Emily, with an honesty that surprised them both. "The man you were before building all these walls." The music ended, but they remained embraced a few seconds longer than socially acceptable. When they separated, something had subtly changed between them. As if a long-closed door had begun to open slightly. "Let's go home," said Michael, and for the first time since the wedding, the word home sounded like something shared, not a property to which she had been invited to reside. The weeks following the ball brought a gradual but undeniable transformation in the dynamic between Emily and Michael. Like tectonic plates that imperceptibly slide until suddenly, the entire landscape has changed. Silent dinners transformed into conversations extending until midnight. Michael began bringing her to the shipyards, introducing her to engineers and workers, explaining ongoing projects with contagious enthusiasm. "This will be the largest vessel built in our facilities," he explained, as they toured the enormous structure under construction, as tall as a 5-story building. "A specialized cargo ship that will revolutionize maritime transport between America and Europe." Emily observed the blueprints with genuine interest, asking questions that surprised even veteran engineers. Her father, before financial ruin, had directed an export company. Something of that knowledge remained in her, like a forgotten language she was beginning to remember. "There's a discrepancy in these numbers," she pointed out one day, reviewing documents Michael had left on the breakfast table. "This cost projection doesn't match the materials specified in the base contract." Michael looked at her with surprise, taking the papers and studying them carefully. "You're right," he finally admitted, with a mixture of amazement and respect. "This could have cost us millions if not detected in time." "You have your father's eye for business," he added later when they were alone. "I investigated his trajectory. Before his illness, he transformed a small family vineyard into one of the most respected export companies in New England." "You investigated my family before the wedding?" Emily asked, unsure whether to feel flattered or offended. Michael smiled with a touch of guilt. "I investigate everything that matters to me." That night, for the first time, Emily dared to take the step both had been avoiding since their wedding night. She approached him in the library, where he reviewed reports under the amber light of an antique lamp. Without words, she took the papers from his hands and set them aside. Then, with a determination she didn't know she possessed, she sat in his lap and kissed him. Michael's response was instantaneous, as if he'd been containing a torrent behind a dam about to yield. His hands, always so controlled, slid down her back, drawing her closer, while the kiss deepened with an urgency that surprised them both. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her lips, giving her one last chance to retreat. Emily responded by unbuttoning the first buttons of her blouse. The following morning brought a new intimacy, but also the first signs of the approaching storm. A call from David interrupted breakfast. Problems with the new project, nervous investors, rumors in the financial sector. "I have to go," Michael announced, kissing her briefly. "Don't wait up for dinner." The following days were a whirlwind. Michael barely appeared at home, and when he did, he was distant, worried, reviewing documents until the early hours. Emily tried to help, offering suggestions based on what she had learned, but he rejected them kindly, retreating again into his professional shell. "I don't want you to worry about this," he would say, as if she were a child to protect, not a partner in life. The crisis erupted on a Tuesday in April, when an unexpected Atlantic storm caused severe damage to one of the vessels under construction. The losses were in the millions. Worse yet, the reputation of Sullivan Shipyards was at stake. Emily found Michael on the terrace that night, soaked by the rain still falling, contemplating the raging sea as if seeking answers in its blind fury. "We're going to lose everything," he said when he sensed her presence. He didn't turn to look at her. "The flagship project? Investor confidence? Future contracts?" Emily approached, ignoring the rain beginning to soak her dress as well. "Why didn't you tell me how serious the situation was?" "For what? So you could watch me fail?" His voice had an edge he'd never directed at her before. "To confirm that the great Michael Sullivan is just a facade, as everyone whispered when you married me." "So we could face it together," Emily responded, holding his gaze despite the pain his words caused her. "Because that's what a marriage is. Not unilateral protection, but mutual support." Michael let out a bitter laugh. "What do you know about marriages at 22? What do you know about carrying the weight of generations, of hundreds of families dependent on your decisions?" The words hit Emily like slaps. She stepped back, pain rapidly transforming into indignation. "I know enough to recognize when fear speaks instead of the man. And right now, Michael Sullivan, you're not the man I married, but the ghost of your own insecurities." She turned and left, leaving him alone in the rain. That night, Emily didn't sleep in the master bedroom. Instead, she took refuge in one of the guest rooms, staring at the ceiling while listening to the storm lash the windows, and wondering if the first real chapter of her marriage would also be the last. At dawn, she made a decision that would change the course of everything. Catherine Thompson's mansion, Emily's aunt by marriage, stood in the exclusive area of Beacon Hill with a privileged view of the Charles River. A property as ostentatious as its owner, who had ascended socially by marrying a New York investor, whose fortune tripled the Sullivans, a fact Catherine never failed to mention. Emily took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell, mentally rehearsing the exact words she would use. Her relationship with Catherine had always been complicated. The woman had treated her with a mixture of condescension and false affection since she was a child, especially after her family's fall from grace. "Emily, dear, what an unexpected surprise." Catherine's voice overflowed with false effusiveness as she received her in the main salon. "I thought you'd be too busy with your new status as Mrs. Sullivan to visit us." "I need to speak with you in private, Aunt," Emily responded, ignoring the barbed comment. "It's an important matter." Catherine's eyes gleamed with poorly disguised curiosity. "Of course, dear. Problems in paradise so soon? I always said that marriage was rushed." Emily maintained her composure, though she felt every word from Catherine scratching at her already fragile confidence. Once alone in the study, with the doors closed, she got straight to the point. "I need a $3 million bridge loan to save Sullivan Shipyards." Catherine blinked, clearly surprised by the frankness and the amount. "Michael sends you to ask for money. How unexpected." "Michael doesn't know I'm here," Emily clarified, "and I'd prefer it stay that way." "Intriguing," murmured Catherine, studying her with renewed interest. "Why would you risk your newly established marriage with such a bold gesture?" Emily held her gaze. "Because sometimes to save what you love, you must be willing to lose it." What followed was a tense negotiation where every word, every term, carried the weight of possible salvation or definitive defeat. Catherine, despite her flaws, was a formidable negotiator. She offered the money with fair interest, but with a condition that was more costly to Emily than any percentage rate: her presence on the Sullivan family board. "A simple seat as an observer," explained Catherine with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "After all, if I'm going to rescue my niece by marriage's legacy, I deserve some participation." Emily knew what this would mean. Michael would consider such a concession an unforgivable betrayal. The family boards were sacred, hermetic spaces where generations of Sullivans had made decisions that shaped the entire region's economy. "I accept," she finally said. knowing she was signing two contracts simultaneously, one financial and another emotional, whose consequences she couldn't yet foresee. When Emily returned home that afternoon, she found Michael in the office, surrounded by documents and looking as if he hadn't slept in days. Guilt for what she had just done almost made her retreat, but love propelled her forward. "I've found a solution," she announced from the doorway, holding the folder with the loan documents. Michael looked up, exhaustion evident in the shadows under his eyes. "What are you talking about?" $3 million. A bridge loan to cover the losses and finish the project on time. Disbelief gave way to suspicion on Michael's face. "How did you get that amount in hours?" Emily placed the documents on the desk. "I went to see Aunt Catherine. The money will be available tomorrow." The silence that followed was so dense Emily could feel her own pulse accelerating. Michael took the papers with slightly trembling fingers, reviewing them page by page. "You did this behind my back?" His voice was barely a controlled whisper, but charged with an emotion Emily couldn't decipher. "You went to ask your family for money without consulting me. Last night you made very clear you didn't consider me capable of understanding the situation, much less helping solve it." Emily stood firm, though inside she trembled. "So I made the decision to demonstrate that this marriage is real for me, even if for you it remains a convenient arrangement." Michael rose abruptly, turning his back to Emily as he approached the window. His rigid posture revealed the internal storm developing within him. "You don't understand what you've done," he finally said. "Catherine Thompson has been trying to infiltrate Sullivan business for decades. You've given her exactly what she wanted." "No," responded Emily, moving closer until she stood just a step away. "I've given her limited access as an observer on the board, in exchange for saving the legacy that matters so much to you. A small price compared to the alternative." When Michael turned to face her, Emily expected to find anger, perhaps even contempt. Instead, she saw something that left her breathless. Absolute vulnerability, naked and painful. "Why?" he asked, his voice broken. "Why would you risk your position, your pride, to save me?" Emily closed the distance between them, placing a hand on his chest, feeling his accelerated heartbeat under her palm. "Because we're a family now. Your battles are my battles." In a sudden movement that surprised her, Michael pulled her to him in an embrace so intense it almost hurt, burying his face in her hair. "I don't deserve this," he murmured against her neck. "I don't deserve you." "Love is never about deserving," Emily responded, returning the embrace with equal force. "It's about choosing every day despite everything." That night, as the moon illuminated the master bedroom where they both slept together again, Emily understood she had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. She was no longer the inexperienced young wife trying to find her place in a foreign world. She had become an equal, a partner in all possible dimensions, willing to fight for what she now considered as much hers as his. The Boston spring unfolded its splendor, while the financial crisis began to gradually recede. The bridge loan had worked as a lifeline, allowing the flagship project to continue as scheduled. But the real transformation wasn't happening in the shipyards, but inside the Sullivan mansion. Emily had begun to leave her mark in every corner of the house. Previously closed rooms were opened one by one, fresh air replacing decades of dust and neglect. Where dark and solemn tones once predominated, now colors inspired by the Atlantic palette, deep blues, aquamarines, foamy whites, brought new life. "Are you redecorating the entire mansion?" Jessica asked, with a mixture of surprise and amusement when she visited the house and found painters working in the main foyer. "I'm returning life to it," Emily responded simply. "Houses, like people, need to breathe to avoid dying inside." The relationship between the sisters-in-law had evolved toward mutual respect that was beginning to resemble friendship. Jessica, a keen observer, had noticed the change in her brother. He smiled more. His obsession with control gradually yielded. He had even begun delegating responsibilities he previously considered exclusively his. "You're good for him," she commented, as they shared tea on the new terrace Emily had prepared on the rooftop, with panoramic views of the entire harbor. "I haven't seen him so present in years." "We're both learning to be present," Emily responded thoughtfully, "to not live trapped between the ghosts of the past and fears of the future." Emily's boldest initiative came one afternoon in May, when she presented Michael with a project she had been developing secretly for weeks. A literacy program for the children of shipyard workers. using the mansion's numerous empty rooms as improvised classrooms. "You want to open our home to the workers' children," Michael repeated, clearly surprised by the proposal. "No Sullivan has done anything like this in generations." "Perhaps it's time to create new traditions," Emily responded, unfolding detailed plans on the desk. "The shipyard's future doesn't depend only on ships, but on the people who build them and their families." To her surprise, Michael not only approved the idea, but expanded it, suggesting university scholarships for the most outstanding and specialized professional training programs. "My grandfather started as a naval carpenter," he revealed, with a nostalgia Emily had never heard in his voice. "He always said a ship's true strength isn't in the steel, but in the hands that shape it." The first Saturday in June, the Sullivan Mansion opened its doors to 28 children between 6 and 12 years old. The sound of children's laughter filled the century-old corridors for the first time, transforming the solemn mansion into a vibrant space full of possibilities. Emily watched from the library entrance, now converted into the main classroom, as Michael, to everyone's surprise, including her own, had offered to teach basic concepts of naval architecture to the older children. She saw him kneeling beside a 10-year-old boy, explaining with infinite patience how keel design affected a ship's stability, using a scale model to demonstrate his points. "I never imagined I had a talent for this," he confessed that night, while they dined in the intimacy of the small garden terrace that had become their favorite space. "Teaching, sharing what I know. I always thought I was too impatient, too demanding." "Perhaps you'd never before found students who showed you the pleasure of seeing the world through new eyes," Emily responded, pouring more wine into his glass. "Sometimes we need others to reveal parts of ourselves we didn't know." The conversation drifted to a topic they had both been delicately avoiding: the future of their own family. Until then, the possibility of children had remained a tacit but unverbalized expectation, something that would eventually come as dictated by family traditions. "Have you thought about having children of your own someday?" Michael asked, with a caution that revealed the question's importance. Emily took a sip of wine before answering. "I've thought about it a lot, especially today, seeing this place filled with children." She paused, searching for the exact words. "But I don't want to have children just because it's what's expected of us, or to continue the Sullivan name. I want it to be a decision we make because we truly desire it, because we're ready to share not just our genes but our hearts." Michael extended his hand across the table, intertwining his fingers with hers. "And what does your heart desire, Emily?" "To build something real with you first," she responded honestly, "to know each other completely, to love without reservation. And then, if we decide to bring a new life into this world, let it be because we have so much love we need to share it." That night, under a starry sky that seemed to bless their words, Emily discovered another unknown facet of Michael when he took her to the music room that had remained closed since his mother's death. The grand piano, a magnificent piece of gleaming ebony, dominated the space. To her surprise, Michael sat at the instrument and began playing a melody that flowed like water over rocks, melancholic but full of tentative hope. "I didn't know you played," Emily whispered, moved by the unexpected revelation. "I stopped after her," Michael responded without ceasing to play, his fingers finding the keys as if he had never abandoned them. "Music exposed too much, revealed more than I was willing to share." Emily sat beside him on the bench, observing the hypnotic movement of his hands over the keyboard. "And now," Michael smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and softened all his features. "Now I want you to hear everything I can't say with words." The melody transformed, evolving from nostalgia toward something new and vibrant, like an awakening after a long winter. Emily rested her head on Michael's shoulder as the notes filled every corner of the mansion which, for the first time since she had arrived, was beginning to truly feel like home. Summer brought an apparent calm. Business had stabilized, the main project was advancing as planned, and Catherine's presence on the family board, though initially tense, had proven less intrusive than feared. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. However, Emily began noticing subtle signs that something wasn't right. Michael had started suffering frequent headaches he tried to conceal with medication. Sometimes she found him massaging his temples in the office, with an expression of pain that immediately disappeared upon noticing her presence. Other times she heard him rise in the middle of the night, walking the corridors to avoid waking her, returning only when fatigue overcame him. "You should see a doctor," Emily suggested one morning, when she found him pale and with dark circles under his eyes at breakfast. "It's just stress," he responded with a forced smile. "It will pass when we finish the cargo ship." But Emily wasn't convinced. She had begun reading the same reports as he did, attending the same meetings, and although the challenges were considerable, nothing justified the physical deterioration she observed in her husband. The situation reached a critical point during a dinner with international investors at the Four Seasons restaurant. In the middle of negotiations, Michael abruptly excused himself and headed to the bathroom. When he didn't return after 15 minutes, Emily went looking for him, finding him leaning against the corridor wall, his face beaded with cold sweat and a hand pressing his chest. "It's time to end this," Emily said firmly, ignoring his protests while calling a taxi. "We're going to the hospital right now." The diagnosis came after a battery of tests at Massachusetts General Hospital, a congenital heart condition Michael had been ignoring for years, aggravated by chronic stress and unhealthy work habits. It wasn't immediately fatal but required surgery and a significant change in his lifestyle. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily asked when they were alone in the hospital room. The betrayal she felt was palpable in her voice. "How long have you been hiding this?" Michael looked away, fixing his gaze on the window, where a fragment of the Atlantic was visible, always constant, always in motion. "I discovered it 3 years ago during a routine checkup. They told me that with medication and reducing stress I could manage it." "And you decided to ignore both recommendations?" Disbelief gave way to anger in Emily's voice. "What were you trying to achieve? To work yourself to death for a legacy you couldn't enjoy?" "I was trying to be who everyone expected me to be," Michael responded, with a quietness that contrasted with Emily's intensity. "The unbreakable Sullivan, the man who never fails." "And what about being the man who promised honesty in his marriage vows?" Tears now appeared in Emily's eyes, tears of frustration and fear. "You promised to share your life with me, not hide fundamental parts of it." "I didn't want you to see me weak," he finally confessed, with the vulnerability he only showed in his most intimate moments. "Not when you were just beginning to see me as someone worthy of respect." Emily took his hand with a mixture of tenderness and desperation. "Respect isn't built on the illusion of perfection, Michael. It's built on honesty, on the willingness to show both strengths and weaknesses." The silence that followed was charged with the weight of long-repressed truths, of never-verbalized fears, of expectations imposed by generations. Finally, Michael gently squeezed Emily's hand. "I'm afraid," he admitted, pronouncing the words as if they were a painful confession, "not of dying, but of not being enough. Of disappointing everyone who depends on me." Emily sat on the edge of the bed, cradling his face between her hands. "Don't you see that you already are enough, not for what you do or achieve, but simply for who you are?" The surgery was scheduled for September, giving time to prepare the shipyards to function during Michael's absence. The following days brought difficult decisions and long postponed conversations. Emily gradually assumed more responsibilities, learning the intricacies of a business much more complex than she had imagined. "I'm impressed," David commented one afternoon, while they reviewed pending contracts together. "Many executives with decades of experience don't understand the financial nuances you've grasped in weeks." "I had a good teacher," Emily responded, referring to both her father and Michael. "And besides, I have no other choice. We can't allow everything he's built to crumble while he recovers." David studied her with an evaluative look. "It's not just for the business that you're doing this, is it?" Emily set the documents on the desk and looked out the office window toward the shipyards that extended along the coast. "When we married, I thought I was sacrificing my freedom for my family's security. Then I believed I was building a real marriage from a convenient arrangement." She paused, carefully choosing her words. "Now I understand I'm fighting for the future of a man who, despite all his walls and silences, has shown me what it means to truly love." The words floated in the air, a declaration she hadn't even verbalized so clearly with Michael himself. David nodded respectfully, recognizing the depth of feeling without needing further explanation. That night, Emily found Michael in the third-floor observatory, a semicircular space with large windows offering a panoramic view of the entire bay. He sat in silence, contemplating how the city lights began to turn on as the sun set behind Beacon Hill. "I've been thinking about resigning," he said when he sensed her presence, "about letting it all go, selling the shipyards, seeking a quieter life." Emily sat across from him, studying his face in the half-light. "Is that what you truly desire, or is it fear speaking for you?" Michael smiled sadly. How to distinguish between the two when they've been inseparable companions for so long? "By making decisions from love, not from fear," Emily responded with a certainty that surprised them both. "You don't have to choose between your health and your legacy. We can find a balance, a new way of leading that doesn't consume you." "We can?" The question contained both hope and doubt. "Together," Emily affirmed, extending her hand to him as she had done at the altar months earlier, but this time with a deep knowledge of what that promise meant. As it should have been from the beginning. Just 2 weeks before the scheduled surgery, a ghost from the past returned to disturb the fragile peace Emily and Michael had built. The news arrived in the form of an apparently innocent email. Thomas Bennett, Michael's former best friend and Victoria's current husband, requested an urgent meeting to discuss a possible collaboration between their companies. "It's a trap," Jessica declared when Emily consulted her, taking advantage of Michael having gone for pre-operative tests. "Thomas has nothing to offer that interests us. This is Victoria manipulating from the shadows." "But why now?" Emily questioned, intrigued by the suspiciously convenient timing. "It's been almost 2 decades since that happened, and months since we saw each other at the ball." Jessica served 2 glasses of dry white wine, passing one to Emily while settling on the blue salon sofa. "Because now there are rumors about Michael's health circulating in certain circles. And sharks always smell blood, even miles away." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "You think they would try to take advantage of a potential weakness for some kind of business revenge?" "Victoria never got over Michael rebuilding his life after her," Jessica responded with bitterness. "For years, while he buried himself in work and avoided any serious relationship, she could console herself thinking she had destroyed him. But then you appeared, and suddenly he's stronger, more complete than he ever was with her." The revelation opened a new perspective for Emily. Until that moment, she had considered Victoria as a figure from the past who had hurt Michael. Now she began to glimpse a more sinister motivation. It wasn't simple curiosity she had seen in her eyes during the ball, but a calculated assessment, like someone examining a chessboard looking for the next move. "We won't tell Michael anything," Emily decided after long reflection. "Not now, when he needs all his concentration on recovery." "And what will you do with the meeting request?" Jessica asked. Emily smiled with a determination that would have surprised the young woman who had nervously arrived at the Sullivan mansion months ago. "I'll accept it myself. It's time they met the real Mrs. Sullivan." The meeting was set for 3 days later in a discreet downtown restaurant. Emily arrived deliberately 10 minutes late, a small but significant declaration of power. Thomas Bennett was waiting alone, which constituted the first surprise. "Mrs. Sullivan," he greeted, rising with exaggerated courtesy. "A pleasure to finally have the opportunity to speak privately." Emily accepted his extended hand with a firm but brief handshake. "Mr. Bennett, I confess I expected your wife to join us." Thomas smiled with some discomfort, revealing premature wrinkles around his eyes. At 45, he appeared considerably older. "Victoria is in New York for unavoidable commitments. In any case, this proposal is strictly professional." During the following hour, Thomas outlined an elaborate joint venture plan to expand operations toward the Asian market, using his financial company's contacts and Sullivan's naval expertise. The proposal at first glance seemed solid and even tempting, but Emily detected inconsistencies in the projected margins and a deliberate vagueness regarding each party's actual contributions. "It's an interesting proposal," she finally commented, closing the folder with documents he had given her. "But I wonder why present it now, precisely when rumors are circulating about the supposed fragility of our position." Thomas visibly paled. "I don't know what you're referring to." "Let's stop pretending, Mr. Bennett." Emily maintained a cordial tone that contrasted with the harshness of her words. "This proposal doesn't seek genuine collaboration, but privileged access to our proprietary designs and eventually to our international client portfolio." "That's a very serious accusation," Thomas protested, although his body language betrayed his nervousness. Emily leaned slightly over the table, lowering her voice. What's serious is trying to take advantage of a personal medical situation to undermine a century-old business. What's truly serious is that you allow your wife's resentments toward my husband to dictate your business decisions. Thomas dropped the facade of cordiality. You have no idea what you're talking about. Victoria got over Michael a long time ago. Then explain why you keep a detailed file on every Sullivan business move for 18 years, Emily counterattacked, revealing information David had discovered during a discreet investigation. Explain why you tried to sabotage our contract with the Norwegians last year. The silence that followed was more revealing than any verbal confession. Thomas slowly gathered his documents, defeat evident in every gesture. "It was never my idea," he finally murmured. "I really respected him, you know, Michael. Even after everything." Emily felt a sudden compassion for this man who seemed trapped in a web of his own making. "You're still in time to do the right thing, Mr. Bennett, not as a business partner, but as the friend you once were." When they parted at the restaurant exit, something fundamental had changed. They hadn't reached any business agreement, but Emily had clearly established that the Sullivans, under her co-leadership, wouldn't be easy prey for old grudges. That night, as she watched Michael sleep, his breathing slightly irregular due to medication, Emily reflected on the many types of courage that existed. There was the obvious courage of facing storms at sea or directing business empires. But there was also the silent courage of keeping painful secrets to protect those we love, of carrying invisible weights so others can advance unburdened. She gently kissed Michael's forehead and whispered, "I too know how to keep secrets for love." The eve of surgery arrived with a storm lashing the Boston coast, as if the sea itself wanted to express the emotional turbulence Emily and Michael felt. The preparations were complete. David would supervise the shipyard's daily operations, Jessica would keep the family board at bay, and Emily would alternate between the hospital and headquarters, ensuring nothing collapsed during Michael's recovery. That night, as wind battered the windows of the master bedroom, Emily found Michael sitting on the edge of the bed, contemplating an old photograph she had never seen before. She approached silently and saw the image showed a boy of about 8 alongside a stern-looking man, both standing before a ship under construction. "My father," Michael explained without looking up. "The day he first took me to the shipyard and told me that someday all of it would be my responsibility." Emily sat beside him, observing the contrast between the boy with bright, curious eyes and the man with an impenetrable expression. "He looks like you," she commented softly. "That's what I've always feared," Michael confessed, placing the photograph on the nightstand. "Becoming him. Brilliant in business, respected by all, but incapable of showing vulnerability, of truly connecting with those he supposedly loved." The revelation illuminated for Emily many of Michael's behaviors during their months together, his constant struggle between control and openness, his fear of showing weakness, his genuine surprise each time she accepted his imperfections instead of judging them. "What was he like?" Emily asked, aware this was territory they had never deeply explored. Michael remained silent for a few moments, as if organizing long-held memories. "He was a ghost inhabiting our house. He left before dawn, returned after dinner, spent weekends locked in his office. I can't remember a single time he asked how I felt or what I dreamed." He paused, the storm outside accompanying the internal tumult of his memories. "When he died, I discovered he had kept every one of my childhood drawings, every school report card, every newspaper clipping mentioning any of my achievements. He had them chronologically organized in folders in his office safe." "He loved you, in his way," Emily suggested, taking his hand. "Yes, but he never learned to express it. And I repeated his patterns, didn't I? Building walls, maintaining distances, confusing success with personal worth." Emily rested her head on Michael's shoulder, sharing the weight of that confession. "The difference is that you're fighting to change. You're breaking the cycle." "What if I don't survive tomorrow?" The question emerged as an almost inaudible whisper. "What if I never have the opportunity to be better than he was, than I have been until now?" Emily knelt before him, taking his face between her hands, forcing him to look at her directly. "Listen to me, Michael Sullivan. You will survive, because you have much more to live for than you imagine. You will recover, and together we'll build something different from everything you've known, a legacy that isn't measured in ships or dollars, but in shared love, in lives touched, in walls torn down. The tears Michael had contained his entire adult life began to flow silently, without shame, without resistance. Emily held him as the inner storm finally found release, accompanying the one raging outside the house. They spoke no more words that night. None were needed. In that shared embrace, in that mutual vulnerability, they had crossed a threshold that no marriage vow, no legal contract, no ceremony could ever formalize. The morning of the surgery dawned surprisingly clear, as if the storm had cleansed not only the air, but also something in their souls. When the nurses came to prepare Michael for the operating room, he took Emily's hand with a serenity that contrasted with the previous night's fear. "Whatever happens," he said with a clear voice, "I want you to know that these months with you have been the most real of my entire life." Emily kissed his lips softly. "This isn't an ending," she whispered against his mouth. "It's just the beginning of our true story." The 6 hours the intervention lasted were the longest in Emily's life. Jessica remained by her side the entire time, surprising her with silent but constant support. David arrived with reports from the shipyard, not because they were urgent, but to distract her with practical matters. Even Catherine appeared briefly, bringing coffee from a nearby cafe and showing genuine concern that belied her usual calculating coldness. When the surgeon finally came out to inform them, the expression on his face caused Emily's heart to stop for an instant. "It was more complex than we anticipated," the doctor explained with professional caution. "We found additional damage that didn't appear clearly in the previous tests. But will he recover?" Emily's voice sounded strange to her own ears, as if it belonged to someone else. "With proper care and significant changes to his lifestyle, yes. But recovery will be longer and more difficult than we initially predicted." The following weeks passed in an exhausting routine for Emily. In the morning she went to the shipyard, where decisions couldn't wait and problems required immediate solutions. In the afternoon she remained at the hospital, reading Michael the day's reports, discussing strategies, or simply holding his hand while he slept, weakened by the intervention and medication. One afternoon, while Michael dozed, Emily found among his personal effects a small notebook she had never seen before. Opening it, she discovered it was a diary he had begun writing the night after their conversation about surgery fears. The first entry, dated precisely that day, began with words that took her breath away. "To my son or daughter, if I never get to meet you, I want you to know who your father was, not the man others will remember, but the one who existed in the spaces between business decisions and public appearances. The man your mother came to know and, against all odds, decided to love." Emily closed the notebook, overwhelmed by the intimacy of those words not meant for her. She carefully put it back where she had found it, but that night, in the solitude of the mansion that now seemed too big and empty, she allowed herself to cry for the first time since the whole crisis had begun. They weren't tears of despair, but of deep recognition. The man she had married for convenience was transforming into someone she consciously chose each day, with all his complexities and contradictions. October arrived with an explosion of vibrant colors in the Sullivan Mansion gardens. 3 weeks after surgery, Michael was finally returning home. The journey from the hospital had been silent, both absorbed in their thoughts as the car traveled through Boston streets, covered with fallen leaves. "I've been thinking," Michael suddenly said, breaking the silence when they were already in sight of the property entrance, "about all that has changed since you came to this house." Emily gave him a tired but genuine smile. The weeks of dual responsibility had left visible marks on her, small worry lines around her eyes, a slight weight loss that made her cheekbones more prominent. "Everything changes constantly. It's the only certainty we have." "I'm not referring just to circumstantial changes," Michael clarified, taking her hand. "I'm talking about fundamental transformations. This house was a mausoleum of petrified memories. Now it has life. It has a future." When the car stopped at the main entrance, a surprise awaited Michael. All the shipyard personnel, from executives to workers, had gathered to welcome him. Genuinely concerned faces lit up seeing him, and spontaneous applause erupted when he descended from the vehicle, leaning slightly on Emily. "I wasn't expecting this," he murmured, visibly moved. "You have no idea how many people truly appreciate you," Emily responded quietly. "Not as a boss or as a surname, but as the man you are." Recovery progressed slowly with ups and downs that tested Michael's patience and Emily's strength. There were good days when he could walk in the gardens for almost an hour, discuss business aspects without tiring, even laugh at the antics of children still attending the educational program they had implemented. And there were dark days when pain reappeared, when frustration at his temporary weakness made him irritable and distant. "What if I never returned to who I was?" he asked one particularly difficult afternoon, after a simple walk left him exhausted and humiliated by his own fragility. Emily, watering plants in the greenhouse, where they had taken refuge from the drizzle, looked at him with an intensity that disarmed him. Perhaps that's precisely the hidden blessing in all this, the opportunity to become someone new, someone better. "You always know what to say to challenge me," Michael responded, both frustrated and admiring. "Not always," Emily confessed with a melancholy smile. "Sometimes I'm just trying to find light in darkness, for both of us." That afternoon, while Emily reviewed documents in the office they now shared, David arrived with intriguing news. Thomas Bennett had requested a private meeting, not to discuss business, but for a personal matter he insisted was urgent and directly concerned Michael. "Have you mentioned this to my husband?" Emily asked, recalling her secret meeting with Thomas months ago and the decision to protect Michael from these tensions during his recovery. "Not yet. I thought you might want to evaluate it first." Emily reflected for a few moments. The old instinct to protect Michael from any disturbance remained present, but something had changed. She no longer saw him as someone to shield from difficult truths, but as an equal with whom to share both the good and the challenging. "I'll discuss it with him tonight. The decision should be his." To her surprise, Michael received the news with disconcerting calm. He was sitting on the covered terrace, wrapped in blankets despite the heater, observing the choppy sea under a leaden sky. "I knew someday we would have to face this," he said simply. "Ghosts don't disappear just because we decide not to look at them." "You don't have to do this now," Emily insisted, concerned about the impact it could have on his recovery. "Your health comes first." Michael took her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that had become habitual between them. "My health includes healing old wounds, not just physical ones. Tell David to arrange the meeting for the day after tomorrow, here at home." The day of the meeting dawned unusually sunny for mid-October. Emily had arranged for it to take place in the house's smaller and cozier salon, with views of the inner garden. David would accompany Thomas there and remain nearby if needed, while she would wait in the adjacent office, respecting privacy, but close enough to intervene if the situation affected Michael. Thomas Bennett arrived punctually, looking notably more haggard than during his meeting with Emily months ago. He carried a worn leather portfolio that he held firmly as if it contained something extraordinarily valuable. The encounter lasted exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes. Emily could occasionally hear raised voices, followed by long silences. When the door finally opened, Thomas exited first, his face transformed by an emotion she couldn't identify. As he passed by her, he paused briefly. "Take good care of him," he said softly. "He's a better man than any of us deserved." When Emily entered the salon, she found Michael standing by the large window, contemplating the garden with an expression of wonder, like someone awakening from a long dream and rediscovering the world. "Are you all right?" she asked cautiously, approaching slowly. Michael turned to her with wet but serene eyes. "Better than all right. Free." On the center table lay the open portfolio, revealing its contents: documents, photographs, letters. The entire story of betrayal and deception that had marked his life for almost 2 decades. "Thomas came to confess the truth," Michael explained, inviting her to sit beside him. "Victoria never ran away with him for love. She did it for money, for position. My father bribed her to leave me." The revelation left Emily speechless. It was so unexpected, so contrary to the narrative that had defined Michael's adult life, that for a moment she didn't know how to respond. "Why would your father do something like that?" she finally managed to ask. Because she didn't fit into his plans for the Sullivan future. She didn't have the right pedigree, the necessary connections. Thomas discovered documents proving it after his father-in-law's death last month. Michael took a photograph from the portfolio, showing his father with Victoria in what appeared to be a secret meeting. "For 18 years I blamed Victoria. I blamed Thomas. I blamed myself, without knowing it was all orchestrated by the man who should have protected me. Emily felt a mixture of indignation and pain for the young Michael, betrayed by the people who should have loved him, but she also understood the liberating magnitude of this revelation, the discovery that his inability to keep Victoria hadn't been a personal failure, but the result of calculated manipulation. "What do you plan to do with this information?" she asked, aware that such a revelation could lead to either healing or a new cycle of bitterness. Michael closed the portfolio decisively. "Nothing. The past no longer has power over me." He approached her, taking her hands in his. "For years I built my life around a wound, convinced that true love had been denied me due to some intrinsic deficiency. Now I understand that wasn't real love. And what I have with you," his voice broke slightly, "what we have together is infinitely more valuable because it's authentic, because we've fought for it, because we've chosen each other every day despite circumstances." That night, under a starry sky revealed between passing clouds, Emily and Michael sealed a new tacit pact. Not one based on family obligations or social conveniences, as the one that had marked the beginning of their union, but one grounded in mutual recognition of their true selves, with all their scars and potential. "I want to start again," Michael said, as they contemplated the sea from their favorite terrace. "Not just in business, but in everything. I want to build something new, something that reflects who we are now." Emily rested her head on his shoulder, feeling how their hearts beat in an increasingly synchronized rhythm. "Then let's begin, not from zero because our experiences have brought us here, but from the truth we've discovered together." The Boston winter arrived with unusual gentleness for the Atlantic, as if nature itself wanted to facilitate Michael's recovery. The days shortened, wrapping the Sullivan mansion in golden light during the brief hours of sun, and in a mantle of silvery intimacy during the long evenings. Michael's physical transformation was evident to everyone. Color had returned to his cheeks, his breathing had normalized, and although he hadn't yet fully regained his previous strength, each day he managed to walk a little further, remain active a little longer. But the deepest change was occurring at a level only Emily could fully perceive, an inner peace, a serene acceptance of both his limitations and his strengths. "I never imagined weakness could teach me so much," he confessed one afternoon, while they reviewed together the new designs for the educational area. They planned to expand on land adjacent to the mansion. "I've directed the shipyard for 15 years, believing the only way to lead was from a position of impregnable strength. How wrong I was." Emily observed the plans where they had projected modern classrooms, practical workshops, and a small auditorium for conferences. What had begun as a modest literacy program was transforming into a naval technical school that would combine formal education with practical learning in the shipyards themselves. "Sometimes we need to lose something to discover what truly matters," she responded, thinking of her own journey from the insecure young woman who had arrived at that house to the woman who now shared business and personal decisions with full confidence in her own judgment. The educational project wasn't the only significant change. Under the joint direction of Emily and Michael, Sullivan Shipyards was implementing a historic restructuring. The traditional vertical hierarchy was being replaced by collaborative teams. A profit-sharing program had been established for all employees, and for the first time in company history, 3 women occupied positions on the board of directors. "My father must be turning in his grave," Michael commented with an ironic smile when they announced the changes at the year-end general meeting. "Or perhaps he's proud to see his son has found his own path," Emily suggested, always ready to offer an alternative perspective. The real turning point came a week before Christmas, when they finally launched the cargo ship that had been under construction all year, the same one whose fate had seemed so uncertain during Michael's medical crisis. The inauguration ceremony gathered authorities, international clients, and of course, all the workers who had made the project possible. Emily watched from the main platform as Michael delivered a speech different from any he had given before. He didn't just talk about technical specifications or business achievements. He spoke of people, of shared dreams, of the community forming around a common purpose. "This ship isn't just an assembly of steel and technology," he said, his clear voice carried by the sea wind to everyone present. "It's the result of skilled hands, creative minds, and committed hearts." From the engineer who designed the keel to the welder who joined each section of the hull, from the electrician who installed the systems to the painter who gave the finishing touches, "All of you have put something of your essence into this creation." He paused, searching with his gaze for Emily among the crowd. When their eyes met, he continued with renewed emotion. "For generations, the Sullivan family has built ships under the premise that what mattered was the surname on the hull. Today I understand that what's truly significant are the lives that intertwine in each project, the families that grow with each keel we lay, the personal stories forged while we forge steel." The spontaneous applause that followed his words resonated throughout the bay. Emily saw tears in veteran workers' eyes, pride on young apprentices' faces, renewed respect in executives' expressions. Later, when the formal ceremony had ended and celebration began among the employees, Emily and Michael retreated to a quiet corner of the dock. The winter sun was beginning to set, tinting the Atlantic with copper and violet hues. "Do you remember our first night together?" Michael suddenly asked, as they contemplated the horizon. Emily smiled at the memory. "You told me about the ocean, about the first time you saw the open sea, not just the harbor." "I said I would be gentle," he continued, intertwining his fingers with hers. "I believed gentleness meant maintaining distance, protecting you from my own shadows. Now I understand true gentleness lies in shared vulnerability, in daring to show all facets, even the imperfect ones." Emily rested her head on his shoulder, feeling how their bodies fit perfectly, like pieces designed to complement each other. "We've both learned that real love isn't an ideal state to be achieved, but a path traveled day by day, decision by decision." The sea wind gently stirred their hair as the first star appeared in the firmament. In that moment of perfect stillness, Michael took a small blue velvet box from his coat pocket. "It's not a ring," he clarified upon seeing the surprise on Emily's face. "We already have one symbolizing a contract. This represents something different." Upon opening the box, Emily discovered a delicate silver pendant in the shape of two intertwined waves, each containing a stone, a deep blue sapphire and an emerald the exact color of her eyes. "Waves are never the same, always changing, constantly transforming," Michael explained as he placed it around her neck. "But some, against all probability, meet and dance together for a time, creating something beautiful in their union." Emily touched the pendant, feeling its light but significant weight against her skin. "It's perfect," she whispered, moved not just by the gift but by the evolution it represented in the man who once communicated primarily through calculated gestures and measured words. That night, as they returned to the mansion that no longer felt like a fortress but a true home, Emily understood they had built something that transcended conventional marriage vows, an alliance based on mutual growth, on the capacity to sustain each other during storms without losing individuality, on the willingness to constantly rebuild, like the sea that never remains static but always continues to be the sea. The following spring brought not only nature's rebirth, but also the culmination of many changes Emily and Michael had initiated during the previous months. The educational program had been officially inaugurated as Sullivan Naval Technical Institute, with over 100 students from diverse socio-economic backgrounds. The company restructuring was already showing tangible results: greater productivity, improved work environment, and surprisingly to skeptics on the board, a notable increase in profitability. "The numbers don't lie," Catherine commented during the quarterly family board meeting, studying the financial reports with evident surprise. "When I suggested new blood was needed in management, I never imagined results so substantial." Emily exchanged a knowing look with Michael. The relationship with Catherine had evolved toward mutual respect, especially after she publicly acknowledged that her niece by marriage had a natural talent for business that went beyond what she had expected. "Success isn't just about business strategies," Emily responded diplomatically. "It's about creating an ecosystem where all involved parties feel they're growing together." Jessica, who now directed the newly created Sullivan Foundation for Sustainable Development, nodded approvingly. "Emily has revolutionized our way of understanding the family business. We're no longer simply shipbuilders, we're future builders." That afternoon, as they walked together through the mansion grounds, now partially converted into an educational campus, Emily noticed Michael seemed unusually thoughtful. His physical recovery was nearly complete. Doctors spoke of an exceptional case, but something seemed to intensely occupy his thoughts. "What's happening?" she finally asked, when they stopped beside the small pond they had restored, where colourful fish now swam among newly planted water lilies. Michael smiled with a certain shyness, a gesture Emily still found charming in a man who to the rest of the world continued projecting security and authority. "I've been thinking about what you said a while ago, about building something real between us, before considering bringing a new life into the world." Emily's heart skipped a beat. It was a topic they hadn't directly addressed since that conversation on the terrace almost a year ago. "And what have you concluded?" "That we've built something more solid than I ever imagined possible," he responded, taking her hands. "That I'm no longer terrified by the idea of being a father, because now I know I won't repeat the patterns I feared so much. That if you're ready, so am I." The emotion that flooded Emily was so intense it momentarily robbed her of words. For months, she had noticed changes in her own feelings on the matter, observing with new interest the children in the educational program, imagining what it would be like to have one of her own. But she hadn't wanted to pressure Michael, aware of his complex feelings regarding fatherhood due to his own family experience. "Are you sure?" she finally managed to ask. "It's not something we can test and then undo if it doesn't work." Michael looked at her with a clarity and certainty that dispelled any doubt. "It's the only thing in my life I'm completely sure of, besides my love for you." That spring marked the beginning of a new stage in their shared journey. It wasn't immediate, these things rarely are, but each month of waiting strengthened their connection, deepened their conversations about the future, refined their shared vision of the family they wished to create. It was during a rainy afternoon in September, while Emily worked in her new office in the renovated wing of the mansion, when she felt the first nausea. At first, she attributed it to accumulated fatigue from the intense work rhythm of recent weeks. But when the symptoms persisted for days, accompanied by unusual sensitivity and subtle changes only she could notice, suspicion began to transform into certainty. The test, discreetly purchased at a downtown pharmacy, confirmed what her body already knew. The life they had imagined together had begun forming inside her, silently weaving the continuation of their story. Emily decided to wait to share the news, not out of doubts or fears, but to find the perfect moment, one that would honor the magnitude of this new chapter they were beginning to write. The opportunity came during the launch of the first ship, designed completely under their joint direction. A revolutionary vessel, more energy efficient and with less environmental impact than any other in its category. They had christened it New Dawn, a name that now acquired additional meaning Michael still didn't know. After the official ceremony, while guests celebrated, Emily led Michael to the ship's bow, where they could enjoy a moment of privacy with views of the infinite horizon. "I have a gift for you," she said, handing him a small package wrapped in navy blue paper. Michael unwrapped it curiously, revealing a carved wooden box. Upon opening it, he found a small object he didn't initially recognize, a tiny sailor's shoe, just the size of his thumb, carved in olive wood. "It's too small even for a newborn," he commented, confused, turning it between his fingers. Emily took his free hand and gently brought it to her abdomen, still flat, but already harboring the beginning of a new life. "He'll have time to grow, approximately 7 more months." Understanding slowly dawned on Michael's face, transforming into an expression of absolute wonder. We're going to—" Emily nodded, tears of happiness clouding her vision. "It seems our crew will increase by next spring." In an impulsive movement that surprised her, Michael lifted her in his arms and spun with her, drawing curious glances from the lower deck. Then, conscious of her condition, he gently set her down and knelt before her, resting his forehead against her abdomen in a gesture of reverence that moved Emily to the depths of her being. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice broken with emotion, "for giving me a second chance at life, for teaching me to tear down walls, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, and now, for this miracle we created together." The sun was beginning to set over the Atlantic, tinting the sky gold and crimson, while New Dawn gently rocked on the waves. In that perfect moment, suspended between the past they had transformed and the future they had sown, Emily and Michael sealed with a kiss the tacit promise to continue building day after day the love that had emerged against all odds in a marriage that began as an arrangement and transformed into the most extraordinary journey of their lives. May sunlight filtered its golden light through the large windows of the master bedroom, now transformed into a warm and luminous space that retained little of the original sobriety. Emily gently rocked Ethan, her 3-month-old son, while humming a lullaby Mrs. Williams had taught her. The little one, with the same intensely blue eyes as Michael and Emily's brown hair, watched her with that look of absolute trust only babies possess. "He seems to have finally fallen asleep," Michael whispered, entering the room silently. He had grown accustomed to returning early from the shipyard, reorganizing his priorities in a way that would have been unthinkable for the man he was 2 years ago. "He's just pretending," Emily responded with a knowing smile. "As soon as I try to put him in the crib, he'll open his eyes as if he was never tired." Michael approached, observing with reverence the little one who had transformed their lives as profoundly as they themselves had transformed everything around them. "He's stubborn like his mother, and strategic, like his father," Emily countered, allowing Michael to take the baby in his arms, still marveling at the naturalness with which this man, who once so feared vulnerability, now surrendered to unconditional love for his son. They went down to the garden together, where preparations for a special celebration were almost complete. That day marked exactly 2 years since their wedding, but also coincided with the official inauguration of the new residential wing for students at the Naval Technical Institute, a project that perfectly symbolized the evolution of their shared vision. "Who would have imagined we'd end up here?" Emily reflected as they watched workers placing the last tables under century-old trees, now in full bloom. "When I climbed those steps for the first time, I felt I was entering a foreign fortress. Now we've created a home," Michael completed, adjusting Ethan in his arms so he could also contemplate the spectacle of colors and movement. "Not just for us, but for everyone who forms part of this community we've built together." The inauguration ceremony gathered people from all social strata of Boston, from authorities and businessmen to the families of students, many of whom had never set foot on Sullivan Mansion grounds before the educational program began. The contrast with the protocol rigidity of their wedding couldn't be more evident. Emily observed from the background as Michael delivered the inaugural speech, with Ethan now in Jessica's arms, who had developed an unexpected vocation as a doting aunt. She contemplated not just the man speaking passionately about future, community, and shared purpose, but also the path they had traveled together. The crises overcome, the battles won, the wounds healed, the walls torn down stone by stone. When the formal part concluded and the celebration began, Emily and Michael found a moment to escape to the private beach accessible from the mansion grounds. It was the same place where they had renewed their vows a year earlier, not out of social obligation, but by conscious choice. The Atlantic was unusually calm that afternoon, its waters reflecting the sky like a turquoise mirror. Barefoot on the sand, with Ethan sleeping peacefully in the carrier Michael wore on his chest, they walked in silence, enjoying the rare intimacy that life with a newborn and multiple responsibilities allowed them. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" Emily asked, intertwining her fingers with Michael's as waves gently lapped at their feet. "I said many things," he responded with a smile. "I was nervous, though I tried to hide it." "You said I will be gentle," Emily recalled, stopping to look at him directly. "At that moment I thought you were talking about what would happen that night. Only later did I understand you were making a much deeper promise." Michael gently caressed his sleeping son's head before responding. "I believed being gentle meant maintaining distances, building walls, protecting everyone from my own shadows. I was so profoundly wrong. True gentleness," Emily continued, completing the thought as they had learned to do, "isn't in moving away to avoid hurting, but in coming closer with full awareness of our capacity both to harm and to heal." They stopped before a rocky formation extending into the sea, the same place where they had renewed their vows. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, transforming the water into a tapestry of liquid gold. "I promise to be gentle," Michael said, taking both of Emily's hands in his. "But you taught me that true love isn't just gentleness. It's shared strength. It's allowing someone to see your cracks and trusting they won't love you less for them. It's building together something stronger than either of us could create alone." Emily observed her husband, not the one assigned to her in a family arrangement, but the man she had chosen day after day through storms and fair weather, and her son, the physical manifestation of all they had built together. She understood that love's deepest meaning didn't reside in the perfection of the beginning, but in all the mornings that came after, when they consciously chose to create something lasting with the imperfect stones of their own humanities. "I don't know what the future holds for us," she said, looking toward the horizon where sea and sky merged in a diffuse line. "But I know we'll face it together, like the tide and the shore, sometimes clashing, sometimes merging, but always finding each other." The sun slowly sank into the Atlantic, tinting the world orange and pink. Ethan awoke, blinking at the golden light as if understanding the moment's beauty. Michael encircled Emily with one arm while holding his son with the other, forming a perfect circle of three beings connected by something deeper than blood or marriage vows. The daily choice to love despite everything, above everything. And as the first stars began to appear in the gradually darkening sky, Emily understood that what they had created wasn't the end of a story, but the beginning of all the stories they would yet live together. Stormy, wonderful, imperfect, and extraordinarily real. Like the very sea extending before them, infinite, changing and eternally faithful to its own nature.